He was one of the most voluble voices of the government against the judiciary, and now he's out of the law ministry. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. We are looking at the sudden ouster of Kiren Rijiju from the Ministry of Law. Mr. Rijiju has been moved to Earth Sciences while Arjun Ram Meghwal has been given independent charge of the Law Ministry. Now, this becomes really critical because we have seen Mr. Rijiju, along with the Vice President, who in his earlier avatar was a practicing lawyer, basically take on the Collegium system, the way by which judges in India are appointed. There has also been a serious tussle between the government and the judiciary on several individual judges, the applications of which have simply not moved. In other words, the government has just sat on the files. Is it the Collegium debate that made the government retreat? Is the government waving some sort of truce or white flag in the run up to the 2024 elections? Or is there some other reason for the sudden ouster of Mr. Rijiju? There are all sorts of whispers floating about in Delhi, in legal and political circles, but none that people are willing to go on record with. In fact, a surprisingly few number of people are even willing to talk about the subject at all. But let's introduce the four brave men who are willing to hazard a guess and try and help us understand why this has happened and what this might mean for the relationship between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Let's introduce our guests on the program today. Dilip Cherian is with us. He's a brand and image consultant, but really actually has his ear to the ground when it comes to the inner workings of all governments. It's good to see you, Dilip. Also joining us is Yashovardhan Azad. Mr. Azad is, of course, a veteran IPS officer, has also been a key intelligence officer, and maybe he can tell us what's going on. Also joining us on the program is senior advocate and of course a former law officer, Biswajit Bhattacharya. It's good to see you, sir. And also joining us is Sanjay Hegde, who's of course a senior advocate with the Supreme Court. So great to see all of you. Let me actually start with a non-legal voice. Dilip, you often know what's going on the insides of government. What happened? What do you think Mr. Rijiju went too far with? Because if it's taking on the Supreme Court for how judges are appointed, he couldn't have done that without the political blessings of his party and his government. What do you think has happened here?
I think three things have happened, and that's what the buzz in Delhi at the moment is. The first is clearly that he had exceeded his brief as far as bullying the judiciary was concerned. The second has to do with what's going on in the Northeast. And the third, which I hadn't really, considered, is that apparently he'd taken a view on the wrestlers matter, which went against the line that the party was taking. So we are talking here, therefore, of three possibilities. And it is equally important to understand that Rijiju has actually been replaced by a bureaucrat, an ex-bureaucrat. So we are talking of actually a stylistic stance also, not just a personality thing, but that the Modi government would like to see a kind of old style bureaucratic capability of working with the judiciary. So these are just straws in the wind. But what has happened is that somebody who's articulate, well spoken, voluble, and has been a voice for the Northeast is suddenly out of the picture. I'll stop
Yeah,
here.
yeah, but just before I open it up, those are three very interesting theories. But when it comes to sort of going too far in what you call quote unquote bullying the judiciary, are you saying that the government wanted to assert itself vis-a-vis sort of the appointment of judges, but not in the way or the manner perhaps in which Kiren Rijiju did? He's used words like anti-India gang for judges. He's used words like opaque. He's spoken about how judges spend more time thinking about appointments than actually dealing with the law. Also, let's not forget, Dilip, that this has been in the past week. There have been two setbacks, I would say. One fully legal, the Delhi government winning powers of administration in a big case from the Chief Justice. The other moral, where the governor of Maharashtra was reprimanded for how the Sena split was handled. Do you think that those defeats have anything to do with what's happened?
I, if one takes those defeats into account, I would also guess that there is some lesson to be drawn from what's happening in the neighborhood, where a Supreme Court has actually played a much bigger role than it was ever expected to. So I guess that there is reason to look, learn by example.
Very interesting. And I was just thinking that he's the second sort of law minister to lose his ministry like this. In earlier times, Ravi Shankar Prasad sort of, law, as suddenly, as without notice, took everybody by surprise. Sanjay Hegde, to you first, and then to Biswajit, and then to Yasho. How's it being seen in legal circles? What's the buzz in your community?
Well, our community, I don't know whether I speak for it. We also have very interesting leaders whom we elect from time to time. So, Mr. Rijiju was quite popular with a certain section of the lawyers, especially the BJP leaning lawyers. He was seen as a uh, young lawyer who had not come from any of the traditional high courts or any of the traditional legal baggage. Uh, he had been a sportsman and everything. But yes, he was, when he took his fight against the Collegium, he was also, in a sense, being seen as representing uh, the fresh blood against the entrenched elite. Uh, I do think that people are surprised by what has happened, but this is not unknown in the history of the BJP itself. You must remember that no less a person than Ram Jethmalani was replaced as law minister when he got into a fight with Justice A.S. Anand. And Ram Jethmalani then ended up writing a huge book against the then law minister Arun Jaitley. He called it, if I remember rightly, Small Men, Big Egos. So,
Yeah.
it is not without precedent. Uh, and one thing to be said about what Mr. Rijiju did, he did not, since Mohan Kumaramangalam's time, there has probably has not been a law minister who has been so abrasive with the judiciary, so trying to push it towards a particular sense of commitment. Uh, Mohan Kumaramangalam was an advocate well versed in the craft and who could have even been Attorney General for India. Mr.
Hmm.
Rijiju, uh, before this, had a law degree but was not often seen in the courts.
Yeah,
So,
but I'm still a bit puzzled, Vishwajit Bhattacharya, because I'm imagining that he was being abrasive because he thought his bosses would approve, and if they did not approve, then they took a long time in indicating that. You've had the vice president even question the basic structure that has been followed ever since the Keshwanand Bharti case. You've had political unanimity earlier on how judges should be appointed. Then, of course, the Supreme Court struck down the NJAC. There's been no move to revive that kind of legislation. There's something about the story that isn't fully comprehensible, at least to me. What do you think?
Barkha, my take is that immediate triggering point is to massive defeats which the union faced on 11th of May by two constitution bench judgments, one in Delhi and one in Maharashtra. Absolutely stinging. These days, the political establishment, they expect that the law minister somehow will do some kind of sort of miracle so that the Union of India keeps winning cases. Man, that was not to be at all. The manner in which the law minister Kiren Rijiju, the day he said to the two-judge bench of the Supreme Court, when appointments were not being cleared, he made a remark that don't say that we are sitting on the file. Run the show yourself, appoint yourself. I mean, this statement, I think, crosses all canons of decency, propriety, and his continuance became untenable on that very day. It was just a question of time. Besides, he did not act in a manner in today's world, and particularly with the Lok Sabha election looming large in less than a year. Supreme Court will be all powerful. Every
Yeah.
political slugfest is going before the Supreme Court. You cannot afford to take on the highest judiciary by, questioning in unison with another constitutional functionary, openly attacking the Supreme Court, the Collegium system,
But
the NJAC.
could he have done that without the blessings of the party? This is what I keep asking. We're all saying today that he took it too far. So is it that he didn't perfectly calibrate it, Biswajit, or is it the defeats? Were the defeats, we're calling Maharashtra a defeat. In strictly legal terms, the government got to stay. It was a moral defeat more than a legal one. And by the way, the lawyer is the same in both cases, Abhishek Singhvi, Congress member of parliament. So that's also interesting. But my point to you is, Mr. Bhattacharya, could he have done this without the blessings of the BJP? We're isolating Rijiju as if he's not part of the larger political ecosystem that asked him to do this or encouraged him to do this.
I think you are quite correct. It could not have been done without the blessings of the political bosses. But the problem is, up to a point, political bosses enjoyed. The moment he crossed the limit and the political bosses realized now he has crossed the limit, he is putting us into trouble now. That is where the Lakshman Rekha was crossed. If you kindly see the repeated statements made by Rijiju, even against National Judicial Appointments Commission. In fact, for the information of this distinguished panel, may I say that I was a petitioner in person, and I argued. I was one of the petitioners in person. I argued the NJAC, and they comprehensively lost. Now you see, you can't attack a process which you comprehensively face defeat in the Supreme Court. Review petition was also, and then you say no, this is wrong. I mean, you battle it out competently in the court. Don't say cry over a spilled milk. No, this is that. So therefore, Barkha, you're absolutely right. It had the blessings, and I'm sure all powers that be must have been enjoying it. But the moment he crossed the limit, you see, the limit was crossed. In fact, the law minister has crossed all limits, and he has been shunted out to a Ministry of Earth Sciences.
I think
and his replacement, sorry for the interruption, his replacement is extremely significant. Mr. Meghwal, he has an outstanding track record of decency, sobriety, and managing. You see, I am using a wrong word. You have to basically manage everything these days. I mean, you can't afford to attack.
That's a significant word.
And say that this basic structure is wrong. Yashovardhan, Bharati is wrong.
Well, the vice president, I'd be interested to see if he quietens down Jagdeep Dhankar after this.
So you have failed to manage. That's it.
Let me get him, Mr. Azad. You've been very blunt in saying that he basically lost the plot, as it were. And Mr. Azad, do you agree that the recent defeats or the setbacks in court, big setbacks, there's a same-sex legislation pending? By the way, Mr. Meghwal, like many other mainstream politicians, is not in favor of that. He's on record in the past having moved a private member's bill against same-sex marriage. But that's across party lines. Even the Rajasthan government has opposed it. My point is simply what's going on. What do you think is going on, Yasho?
Well, let me give you a slightly nuanced approach to what the others have stated so far. Of course, Rijiju went hammers and tongs. And of course, the fusillade was fired on the shoulders of Rijiju by the government. There's no doubt about it. And in fact, when he crossed the limits, that was also with the permission of the government. But in politics, like Ravi Shankar Prasad, he was also a supposed loudmouth, and he went too far. That was again with the unsigned permission of the government, and that's exactly what happened to Rijiju. So the government job is done. The government has made its point clear through these law ministers, and time has come to replace them also to keep the judiciary on the right side and prove that, the government is a very balanced government. And now before the elections, we have an ex-bureaucrat like Meghwal. Another thing, the law ministry is a very sensitive ministry. There are so many things which happen here. But as far as the judgments go, it is well known that the that the minister can't manage that. Of course, there are other things which can be managed by the minister. And of course, we are not going to speak about that. The third thing which I'm going to say is that Mr. Rijiju is an extremely popular man, a wonderful guy. I hope to know him also a little bit. But the only thing is what has happened in the Northeast, yes, and I agree with Dilip there, that either you are a vital cog in the happenings of the Northeast, because it's a very, very sensitive year now, whether it's Meghalaya, where the High Court has come down very strongly on coal mining, or in the Manipur crisis. Unfortunately, the entire thing of the Northeast is managed more for the BJP by Assam Chief Minister. And if Mr. Rijiju was a very, very vital cog, a very important element for the Northeast, then perhaps he would not have been shifted or shifted to a more important ministry. But Earth Sciences he has been shifted to, which has been created in 2006, and you only forecast weather and earthquakes.
Yeah.
You
Well,
have it.
could he have forecast his own sort of political demotion? I don't think so. And Dilip, I want to separate this conversation into two dimensions: the politics and what's happening vis-a-vis the relationship with the judiciary. When you look at the politics, when I remember how Ravi Shankar Prasad, and Prakash Javadekar lost their ministries in one fell swoop. Now you see this happening to Kiren Rijiju. It's also saying something about, it's not just saying something to loudmouths. It's also saying something about how the prime minister possibly thinks and operates. What does it say to you?
I think your distinction between politics and law is wonderful, but we should also look at economics. And I'm not going to hazard a guess on economics either for the moment. But the fact is that this is the first ever time that you've had a single minister axed and dumped downwards. Okay. That's
That's a very
very
important point. That this is not part
that's
of a
very
larger reshuffle. Yes.
this is very significant. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
clearly there was an immediate proximate cause for action.
And
And
by the
we
way, his
all,
deputy was also removed. So it's like a cleanup, a purge of the law ministry. The MOS, SP Singh Baghel, was also moved from law to health. So it's like a purge of the law ministry, which is very significant. So it's one ministry, more than one minister. It's one ministry where the government has decided not working.
yeah. So therefore, I think that there must be more than meets the eye.
Yeah.
And having been somebody who watches this fairly closely for the last X number of years, let me tell you that the story is not complete. We will hear more of this, more will come tumbling out. And the fact is that the signaling that this one person had to go cannot only be to do with judgments or the fact that they are worried about how the Supreme Court is going to behave 12 months from now. It's much more than that, because the big judgments are now out, unless Sanjay will be able to elucidate whether there are any other big judgments which are hugely important and pending as far as the government is concerned. I'm not talking about litigation which may come in fresh, but the fact is that the stuff that came out from SEBI on Adani, for example, all of that has a bearing on what has just happened.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think Biswajit was also making the point that the legal setbacks, depending on your point of view, Shiv Sena was like a rap on the knuckles and the government got to stay in Maharashtra, Sanjay. Kejriwal won back his powers of transfer in Delhi. You have same sex, which is held in reserve. And you also have, the SEBI. You have the Kerala story today. The ban has been stayed in Bengal. I guess the question I'm asking is, do you believe there's a kind of truce flag being waved at the Chief Justice? The Chief Justice is also functioning in a kind of interesting way. Many of these judgments have been read out by him personally. It's interesting.
Well, I'm not very sure that waving a flag to the Chief Justice was the immediate provocation for Mr. Rijiju's unceremonious bringing down to earth.
Earth sciences, same
Earth
thing.
sciences,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then this way, this is a extra bonus if the judiciary perceives it as such. As Dilip said, there is bound to be more in that story. Sooner or later we will find out what that exact file was, or what that exact point of difference was that required the law ministry to be cleaned out. And as far as individual cases are concerned, you fire the lawyers, you don't fire the law minister. The law minister is there to keep an even keel on relations with the judiciary. There have been many good lawyers who've made excellent law ministers, Mr. Jaitley, for instance, or H.R. Bhardwaj on the Congress side, who, even without specifically asking for anything in return, were always there. Whenever an individual judge had an individual problem which could be sorted out away from other people knowing. In this particular case, Mr. Rijiju may have also run afoul of the first law of power. The first law of power says, never outshine the master.
So you actually think he was taking too much, his profile was too visible?
Well, it often happens that if your profile is too visible, then you are brought down to, as I said earlier, brought down to earth from time to time.
But you've raised a very interesting point, and which I want to take to Biswajit Bhattacharya, who said that the defeats or the setbacks in court may have been the immediate trigger. Sanjay makes the point that then you fire the law officers. You've been a law officer yourself. Why do you fire the minister? Why would you say, you haven't looked at Tushar Mehta, or you haven't looked at the other law officers, you've not looked at the SG or the Attorney General, you've looked at the minister and his deputy. And I kind of agree with Dilip that there could be something here that we just don't know.
Obviously, there will be other points which we don't know yet until and unless it comes in the public domain. But as of now, why the law minister is responsible for the government's litigation? Government is the biggest litigant before the Supreme Court, more than 50%. And the central agency, which is situated in the precincts of the Supreme Court, that manages the litigation. Now, law minister directly is handling that central agency. So therefore, there are law officers, there are many. There is an attorney general, there is a solicitor general, there are so many additional solicitor generals, there are standing counsels. I mean, they are all doing their respective jobs. But overall, the buck stops with the law minister. If you have faced a setback, whatever may be the reason, the buck stops with the law minister, because he is the master of the managing the entire litigation on behalf of the government in the country. And may I tell you, Barkha, one thing, that today our Supreme Court is one of the finest. Today's Supreme Court, as I am seeing it, is one of the finest as it has been during the recent past, means 10, 15 years. I was appointed a law officer in 2009, and today we are in 2023. And I dare say today's Supreme Court is absolutely performing in terms of the constitutional hopes and aspirations of the common man.
Well, so, I think people will be glad to hear that, because I think courts are, of course, the last resort for every citizen.
What terrific judgments! Both these 5 judge constitution bench judgments I have read word for word, because I was asked to come before the television channel. So before I come to television channel about a judgment,
you prepare well.
Master.
You basically believe that in the face of taking on this fine bench, you just pushed it too far. A series of legal setbacks, and the buck stops. The buck stops, as you said, even if it's the
justifiable setbacks and the justifiable setbacks for the government, because
I don't see Loknath. I wanted to just bring him in. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm there.
Because the kind of statements which the law minister was making, directly attacking the majesty and sanctity of the rule of law and the Supreme Court, appointment of judges, transfer of judges. I mean, I am repeating. He rendered his position untenable. He had to be removed to another ministry.
Okay, I've got Loknath Chatterjee, who's contested for the BJP in Bengal, is also a lawyer joining us. But I'll just bring in Mr. Azad and then come to Loknath right after that. Mr. Azad, as an intelligence gathering officer, do you think the story, जिसको कहते हैं picture अभी बाकी है? We don't know the story. We're understanding it in the way that what is visibly available, the fight between the government and the judiciary on the appointment of judges. There's a part of this story I think we'll never get to know.
Yeah, the exact trigger, why it has actually happened, it's not really known. But I still reiterate my point, whether it's the judgment of the Delhi by the Supreme Court, which was an excellent judgment, and also Maharashtra, which was another good judgment. I don't think, the judges are going to be swayed by management, by the ministers on their important issues like this. So obviously the trigger is something else. The government has used the law minister. He has served his purpose, and there is time to change, to also assuage the Supreme Court. This is how politics works. And in fact, some of the best law ministers have also been those who have not been lawyers themselves, because it's basically management and not really much to do with his judgment. So I really beg to differ on this point. And I think that very soon, there are a lot of other things which we are not talking about may also come into view, which will give us the exact picture as to why this has happened.
But Loknath, before you joined us, Dilip Cherian was making the very interesting point that this has not happened as part of a larger Council of Ministers rejig. This is the purging of the law ministry. Both the minister and his deputy have gone, and nobody has really told the people of this country why. All the people of this country have seen are very, very visible battles with the judiciary. And almost all of our very eminent panelists believe that the language used by Mr. Rijiju, coupled with the sort of some setbacks for the center in the court in the last week, would have been the immediate trigger. Do you agree?
If you really look at it, that's there. One thing is there that the government's really not offered any such reasons. If you look at it, it's the president of India saying that, on the advice he's been, there's a new incumbent in office. But if you look at it, earlier he was preceded by Ravi Shankar Prasad. Then it was said that one needs to, a fresh blood would essentially let go of the baggage of earlier networks one has. So a non-practicing lawyer in that sense was also essential, thought to be. There was certain pros to it at one point of time when Rijiju was brought in. So when he's gone, perhaps, one can really analyze. That's what there in the public domain to analyze. But yes, as was rightly pointed out, perhaps what was the immediate trigger, or whether there was a trigger at all or not, needs to be seen, or whether it could well be that, he served he's done his job,
utility.
And then of course he needs
utility. Yeah.
I will not want to use that term. I will really not want to use that term. But nonetheless, when he said that, for example, the Intelligence Bureau raw reports were being made public, he wasn't wrong there. Of course, there are two perspectives to it. In fact, when someone went and filed a contempt also against the law minister and the vice president, the courts also threw it out. So, of course, there will be perspectives, of course, in public life. But I don't want to see it with such a, narrow prism. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you believe, and I want to take your point back on, this comment that Mr. Rijiju made, and it was in the context of one of the judges on which the government has just not actually moved, which is the elevation of Saurabh Kirpal, who's openly gay, and it was cited that he has a foreign partner. His elevation was not approved, even though it's within the Collegium right to actually assert itself. My question to you, Loknath, is: do you think Rijiju's ouster is the end of the debate, at least in this election year, over how judges are appointed? End of the public debate?
No, not exactly. There was no, perhaps again, there was no, it was not his burden to carry on any debate. The government will act through its policies. Government may not necessarily act through, mouthpieces of the law minister. So, of course, there has to be a debate, and there is a debate. The government's made its stance very clear as far as, the Collegium system is concerned. There have been affidavits filed in court. There have, of course, we are aware of the NJAC. So, of course, the government, when it's set a policy decision, perhaps a mere rejig in the ministry may not really mean much here.
That's very interesting, and I want to take that around the panel. Dilip, the perspective that this will not end the debate. This will not necessarily see the vice president pipe down. Do you agree, or do you think otherwise?
My sense is that this will indicate a general piping down. So I'm sorry, but I have the view that this is a bigger signal than just a personal axing. I think that there is no doubt that on multiple matters, a more elegant and more acceptable and more pluralistic approach will be taken, and it will not be a total kind of my way or the highway approach.
Yeah. Mr. Azad, I want you to come in before I go back to the lawyers on this suggestion of intelligence reports being made public. The court has been doing some unprecedented thing. It's been putting in the public domain even the differences, for example, between Chandrachud, who was not then Chief Justice, and Uday Lalit. It has been placing in the public domain the reasons that the government doesn't give approval to certain appointments, and Rijiju has pushed back in the past against that. How do you see this debate over the IB reports being put in the public domain?
I think I fully support Mr. Rijiju in what he said. In fact, I tweeted openly on this particular issue. See, the Intelligence Bureau report gives the exact status. Whenever you're having such a sensitive appointment, such a big appointment, it is the job of the Intelligence Bureau, or at least it is tasked upon the Intelligence Bureau to give a brief. An Intelligence Bureau gives you all the details about a particular gentleman. It does not give its view that whether he should be posted or he should not be posted. Now, it is up to you to take a balanced view on that, whether despite that you're doing it or you're not doing it. To make that report, which is collected with great care, precision, effort, etc., is certainly not proper. It should not be brought into the public domain. You can take a view onto that. That is.
Yeah. Sanjay, do you agree? Do you agree with the fact? And the second question is: do you believe now that the judges' appointments that were stalled might also now suddenly move faster?
Well, taking the second question first, if the government wants judges to be appointed, the files will move fast. If they don't want a certain judge to be appointed, they will continue to sit on the files. No change in that game. Taking Mr. Azad's point on IB reports, just let me tell you a particular incident. Chief Justice B.N. Kirpal mentioned it from the bench. That's about 20 years ago. There was a certain lawyer whose name went up. He was a teetotaler, and his friends all enjoyed their drink. So the friends called him Boozer. When the IB report about the man came, it said that he's an alcoholic. The Chief Justice of that day knew what the truth was, but he couldn't hold up the other appointments. Yeah. That man didn't make it at that particular point of time. Later on, he was made a judge.
Yeah.
So, with regard to Saurav Kirpal, all that the Collegium did was, what are you telling us that we don't know? When we made the recommendation, we knew his sexual orientation. He had been open about it. We knew about his partner. Despite that, we think that has nothing to do with his judicial functioning. He will make a very fine judge. And let me add my little voice to the Collegium. I also believe the same thing. Now, what is it that the Collegium resolution reveals? That the IB report is dated X or dated Y. With regard to these two IB reports, we say that you have said and told us nothing that we don't know.
Yeah.
That's all.
So
they don't go into the sources of the IB or anything of that kind. So I don't see what was so confidential about it.
Okay, so my question to you, therefore, Loknath, is that what is the big deal if these IB reports were put in public? And I think the more relevant question is, are we going to see a better functioning? You see, the Collegium, the government can only send the file back once. But if the government doesn't move on the file, what is the Collegium expected to do? And that has been the judiciary's complaint.
No, I'll tell you that, I'll answer both these questions on a basis of principle and policy. See, one aspect is whether, regarding the veracity of these intelligence bureau reports, RNAW reports, that's something else, whether these IB reports reflect the reality, whether they are true, correct. But the policy is whether to disclose them in public or not. The policy is whether to put it out in your decision making or not. The policy is whether we should put it in writing in our, as far the earlier stand was they would say that we've perused the reports. So therefore, the people at times they are privy to very confidential information, which maybe a handful of people would know. So therefore, these agents of the intelligence bureau, these people who give information, they stand exposed. And in the larger scheme of things, it leads to a lot of problems at many other places. So that's the policy, not on the veracity aspect. Of course,
Right.
as a policy, one has to understand. So this is one. The second is again, the government sitting on files or not sitting on files, the government sending its recommendations and everything. So as far as that is concerned, it's not the law minister alone, possibly who will be, taking all these decisions in that manner. What is more important is the policy of the collegium, whether it should be the judges appointing judges, whether, there are pros and cons to it. Pre 91, we had seen the government appointing judges also. Apart, there were a few hiccups there. Apart from that, the system was running. So whether as a policy, we can have judges appointing judges, whether as a policy, we can really allow and turn a blind eye to the judiciary taking its decisions on its own behalf.
And that is a legitimate debate. But Mr. Bhattacharya, before I give Dilip Cherian the last word, the government raised a lot of noise around it through Kiren Rijiju primarily. The vice president made statements on the basic structure of the constitution, but it's not like they moved the legislation. They could have. It's been done before. It had massive political unanimity then. I don't think in today's environment it would, but they didn't do that. And now they seem to be in some sort of retreat. Do you see this as some sort of retreat mode from the government?
Yes, but Haji, the retreat is very clear. The entire law ministry has been washed out and new incumbent is coming. So therefore, clearly the political leadership was not happy with the manner in which law ministry was functioning in the recent past. About the Intelligence Bureau report, may I just say, what Supreme Court has done, selectively giving it to the press is absolutely correct, because in one case, the adverse report was that a candidate was basically going to be rejected solely because he worked in the chambers of his senior some 10 years back, and that his senior wrote an article criticizing the establishment. Now, if this kind of, reports are given to stall a candidate,
I think, Mr. Can I allow Mr. Azad to briefly interject and then let you complete your point, because I'm seeing him react quite agitatedly. Yasho, go ahead.
No, very, very respectfully, I want to tell my friend Mr. Hegde and Bhattacharya sir that IB is not taking. Whenever you have a very sensitive appointment, you'd like to know everything about his background, about what is happening.
But is someone sensitive because they're gay? It's not. What is sensitive?
No, so that's exactly what. No.
But Saurabh Kirpal said the foreign minister is married. I'm so sorry. I don't need to interrupt you. But Saurabh Kirpal said the foreign minister of India, who's really an admirable patriot, who represents India so effectively on the global stage, also is a foreign partner, right? Why does it become sensitive? Because Saurabh Kirpal is married. Or not married, is with a foreign citizen. Sorry, Mr. Azad.
One of the greatest judges of India, Justice Bose.
Okay, you're both speaking together. 1 minute. Mr. Bhattacharya, 1 minute.
Even the IB officials themselves do not think that Mr. Kirpal should not be appointed. They are just giving and illustrating the fact and the background to you. Most of the intelligence we have, a part of the intelligence is secretly gathered. The other part of the intelligence is open intelligence. So basically what you're getting is a total, absolute inclusive information from all fronts, and you make a decision. Don't hit the IB saying the IB is giving it. IB is giving you the background.
Okay, let me allow Mr. Bhattacharya to complete his point, and Dilip has the last word. We do have to close. Mr. Bhattacharya, please.
Yes. In India, one of the greatest judges ever is known as Justice Vivian Bose. He had a foreign wife, and no one questions that.
But I think the point Mr. Azad is making is an IB report is a work in progress at all times. They may just gather a prima facie set of information, don't make it public. But we've gone somewhere else with this debate. Just coming back on what you see happening ahead now, Mr. Bhattacharya, briefly, and then we have to close. Dilip will close it for us. Mr. Bhattacharya, sorry, Sanjay, are you raising your hand to say something, Sanjay? You are? Okay. Can we unmute Sanjay? Please? Yeah, Sanjay, go ahead.
No, what I was saying was that in the UPA government, the second UPA government, you lost 3 solicitors general. In the second NDA government, you see 3 law ministers going. I think there are parallels there.
Okay, that's an interesting detail. Mr. Bhattacharya, you want to conclude your thoughts, sir? Sorry, we've interrupted you twice. Yes.
No, sorry. No, I think what Mr. Azad, the distinguished IPS officer, he has said, broadly, conceptually, he is right. But Supreme Court Collegium, by making exceptions to reveal sometimes some frivolous reports can be given to stall, that will keep IB under check. I think some checks and balance, IB should also have a sense of some responsibility and some fear in mind that frivolous report should not be written to stall an appointment.
Okay, a separate show is called for on the IB and these IB reports. Dilip, the last word. Sorry, Loknath, I must allow you a quick comment as well, and then Dilip. Loknath, yeah.
No. Perhaps that's not the job of the judiciary. The job of the judiciary is to just sift through them, not to keep the IB under check. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Dilip, close this for us.
The lasting metaphor of this is poor Kiren Rijiju not being enough to being not quantifiably enough to sit on files. I think that is the message that comes through. But I think that what we need to remember is that this is a time of shift. All kinds of things are about to happen. We are not going to see the last of this or hear the last of this. And I certainly think that more light needs to be shown on why this happened. Without going into the nature and merits of an IB report, I think selective disclosures of contents rather than process of gathering will only enhance the system. But the fact is that this is a landmark point in time, because this is the first time in almost any government that only 2 ministers from the same ministry have been, dumped on the same day.
That is, in fact, the bottom line. In 25 years of being a reporter, I don't actually remember a time when one ministry was singled out for a purge. And clearly, while all our eminent guests believe that Mr. Rijiju just pushed it too far in the kind of language he used for the judiciary, is that really the complete story, or is there more to come? As they say, watch this space. For now, to Mr. Bhattacharya, Mr. Hegde, Mr. Loknath Chatterjee, to Dilip, Cherian, all of you, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and to our audience, thank you so much, and see you tomorrow. We started Mojo right here in this basement. Just 4 people, 4. And now we're about to hit our first 1 million subscribers. So this is to say thank you to all of you for your support, for your respect, and for your encouragement. We've always gone to where the story is. During the pandemic, when television's big anchors were hunkered down in their studios or at their homes, we hit the road. We traveled from Delhi to Kerala, covering 30,000 kilometers in our small car, reporting from inside ICUs and inside slum tenements. Whether it's flash floods or war zones, we've always put our boots on the ground. In fact, we're just back from Punjab, tailing the Khalistani fugitive Amritpal Singh. And through all of this, we have always put you, the people, first. In an age of partisan polarized media where most journalists are either chamcha ya morcha, we believe the story is sacred and the truth of the story is what matters. And now, as we get ready for the next step, we need your help. Become a Mojo member and get first access to all our big interviews. Get a chance to ask our newsmakers questions. Get a chance to write and report for us for both our website and our channels. And also, interact with me and my colleagues directly through AMA sessions. Literally, ask me anything. Click on the join now right next to the subscribe button, and yes, also subscribe if you haven't yet, and become a Mojo member for just 159 rupees a month. Hope to see lots of you in our community. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.